Welcome to Leading the Next Generation with Tim Elmore, where our mission is to empower the emerging generations with skills to lead in real life. Well, welcome back, podcast listeners. Andrew here, and with me, as always, is our fearless leader, Dr. Tim Elmore. How are you, Tim?
It's a very kind description. I appreciate it. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited about today's conversation because I think we're talking about a subject that's getting a lot of airtime recently on the subject of empathy, right? We are big believers in empathy, but you've started to notice that this empathy train we're on has a little asterisk that we're not talking about.
That's right.
So I'm really excited to dive in today.
I can hardly wait. So let me, if you don't mind, let me just jump right in.
Let's do it.
So a high school principal here in the Atlanta area recently told me that the mother of one of his students requested her daughter to be taken out of her civics class and moved to a different one. When the principal asked why, Mom explained that she was distracted and anxious in her current class. When the principal inquired why a different class would be better, here's what the mother said. She said that her daughter's former boyfriend was in her current class and it would help to get her out of that environment. Now, most of us would agree that this mom was displaying empathy, right?
Yes.
I want to get my daughter out of that hard place. But we have taught for decades now at Growing Leaders, removing the hardship isn't always the best answer.
Yep.
And listeners, I'm hoping you're nodding right now as you're driving your car or whatever. It's not. It makes logical sense to remove the hardship from these stressed out kids, but that's not always what helps them get better. So we celebrate empathy in our day. Everybody would agree with that. It's one of the competencies in social emotional learning programs and even ours. And I'm encouraged that more and more educators are teaching it to students, and more nonprofits, for that matter, are leveraging empathy to recruit volunteers. It's such a need. We all agree that empathy is certainly better than apathy.
Truth.
Okay?
Yep.
Which describes so many people today. But empathy, I'm going to argue now, is a stepping stone to what our students really need from us, which is compassion. Now, these are often interchanged, and you go, Elmore, this is semantics. What are you doing here? You could see it as semantics, but Andrew, you and I are about to banter back and forth, and I want to hear from you too, that there is a difference, and the difference makes a difference. So let me just venture into what's the difference between empathy and compassion. First of all, let me reiterate, empathy is not feeling sorry for somebody in pain, okay? That's sympathy, right?
Right.
Rather, empathy is mentally putting yourself in the suffering person's shoes to feel their pain. As Harvard professor Arthur Brooks reminds us, and I quote, it's the difference between get well soon and I can only imagine how the discomfort you feel right now must be feeling. You know, that sort of thing. So get well soon is a nice little gesture, but that's sympathy. Empathy is, gosh, I'm trying to imagine what this feels like for you. And many of you listeners would say, that would be a step in the right direction for me. I'm kind of low in empathy right now for these kids that are, slacktivist or, have no grit or, lazy bums or whatever. But Andrew, you and I work with thousands of students every year, and we have seen those who practice compassion are better off than those who practice merely empathy.
Absolutely. And it's a conversation that we have so often because we recognize, I think the movement in people talking more and more about empathy is because so many people stop at sympathy, right?
That's right.
And in the same way that you would say sympathy is a great step on the road to empathy, you would also say empathy is not the final destination either, right?
Yeah, it's
so
true.
In a lot of ways, I feel like we're in a moment right now that's pushing us to move from one to the other, but we're not often stopping and asking the question, is this all I need to be doing?
Exactly.
And I think that's the question you're asking.
It so is. In fact, envision a stair step. So the bottom step is apathy.
Yep.
The next step up is sympathy.
Yeah.
Then empathy. But I think the highest step truly is compassion, and that's what we're talking about today. Evidence suggests that empathy really does lessen other people's burdens. And so that's the good news. It's not nothing. In a series of experiments documented in 2017, participants were found to experience significant physical pain relief.
Interesting.
When hearing someone express empathy. So this is incredible. But it's merely a stepping stone, as we've suggested. It's a means to an end. So let me differentiate. When empathy grows into compassion, it becomes more helpful for both you and the person for which you demonstrate it, okay? So here's the difference. Empathy is feeling their pain and wanting to remove the hardship that they're enduring. Compassion is feeling their pain and wanting to equip them to overcome it from now on. Everybody that knows anything about behavioral science would go, yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
But you see, when I practice compassion, it might feel harsh in the moment. It's really not. It's I love you, but it's tough love. And that's hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard.
Is this similar to the old saying about catch a man a fish or give a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach him to fish and he eats for a lifetime?
Absolutely.
It's that same kind of
idea.
idea.
We'll talk about that concept in just a minute. That's absolutely true.
Well, Tim, we want to hear more, so we're going to dig into why it is that compassion is the right choice over empathy. But before we get there, let's take a quick break because I want folks to hear a little bit more about some of the offerings that they might be able to utilize to improve their development and connection with their students. Hey, podcast listeners, Andrew here. At Growing Leaders, we understand the importance of continuous growth for educators. That's why we're thrilled to announce our upcoming professional development sessions designed specifically for you. Myself, along with Dr. Elmore and our team of experienced, fun, and professional communicators, love creating amazing experiences with great content. Whether you're a seasoned teacher or just starting your journey in education, we've got something for everyone. During our professional development sessions, you'll experience insightful ideas, thought-provoking discussions, and hands-on actions that are not only enhance your teaching skills, but also reignite your passion for education. Our sessions cover a wide range of topics, from innovative teaching techniques to fostering a positive classroom culture, to understanding Generation Z, or learning the importance of teaching soft skills to students. Whatever subject you want to cover, if it's about leading the next generation, we'd be honored to come. Get ready to transform your teaching approach and make a lasting impact on your students. Visit our website at growingleaders.com or click the link in the description to explore our upcoming sessions and secure your date. Don't miss this opportunity to invest in yourself and your students' future. All right, Tim, we're back. We've been talking about the difference between compassion and empathy, but let's dig into why is it that compassion is so essential?
Okay. So, listeners, you remember the opening story I gave where this mother asked the principal of a school to remove her child, her daughter, from the hard civics class because her former boyfriend was there. In that example, the mother felt sympathy for her struggling daughter, but was prompted to remove the struggle. We've already kind of nailed that down. That's sympathy and empathy. Compassion is feeling deeply for your daughter and working with her to become tough enough to face the hardship and continue. Andrew, I remember a bunch of times my parents, I was in a tough situation. They said, well, you know, Timothy, you can do this. I know, and you may want to try this. Say this to your teacher. But I had to say it. It wasn't, I'll come in and invade and intrude and overfunction here.
Yeah.
So having raised 2 adult children of my own now, that's really what they needed from me, to leave them in a better spot, able to face similar tough times going forward. And Andrew, we said this ad nauseum, but I will say it again out loud. It's better to prepare the child for the path than the path for the child.
Absolutely.
And yet this is rare today.
I've heard you say it also, there's an inverse relationship between protecting and preparing, right?
Yeah.
The more
So
we
true.
protect, the less actually that they're prepared.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what we're talking about.
So when you practice compassion, you move from a shared feeling to a redemptive action. It's the difference. Here's a good analogy, I think. It's the difference between a friend and a nurse if you're a patient at the hospital.
Yeah.
Okay? Your friend is comforting because they sit beside you and express empathy and perhaps get you some water to drink. The nurse sees your pain and takes action to remedy the disease and gets you tough enough. Both are nice. You like the friend, you like the nurse, but the nurse is better. And I'm challenging you, listeners, as you work with students or employees for that matter, be the nurse, not the friend. Empathy thinks short term, compassion thinks long term. Empathy feels good to give in the moment, but you may feel their pain so deeply you're not even able to act. Did you all hear that? You may feel deep empathy, that's good, but you might not have the inward toughness yourself to act on what you know is in their best interest.
Yeah.
So compassion allows you to practice metacognition and rise above their pain so you can treat the need. Consider the nurse once again. What if your nurses felt empathy for you, but they couldn't stand the sight of blood? Or, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't stay in here. I'm so sorry. I'll send someone else.
I'm feeling it too deeply.
That's exactly right. Now, I know these are ridiculous, but you hear me, don't you? You need them to be able to act objectively in the presence of pain and blood. Andrew, this is a sidebar, but I'm going to do 30 seconds. Holly used to serve on our team. Mm-hmm. She was an RN, and she became an executive, and she was our VP. I remember my blood sugars got really low. I'm a diabetic. And I remember I was so glad on one trip she was there. She didn't get afraid to ask when I was about to pass out. She went into action.
Step into action.
I was glad it was Holly, not a dear friend that said, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that looks really hard.
Yeah.
To be passed out on the floor like that.
Right. Yeah. I didn't need empathy. I needed compassion.
Yeah.
So caring adults, whether you are a boss, a teacher, a parent, a coach, or a youth worker, must progress from empathy to compassion for kids. And because compassion enables you to rise above the negative emotion and take action, it often moves you to act contrary to empathy. Do you follow what I'm saying, everybody?
Yeah.
It looks like I'm not really empathetic when I'm tough, but you really are. So I want to tell a story. My teammate Melissa, we all love Melissa on our team, she recently told me about her son Jackson, who at 16 years old had got his driver's license. He had the family car one night, and he went to the gas station to fill the car up. When he filled the family car up with fuel, he accidentally left the gas cap at the station. Jackson acknowledged it when he returned home that night. Melissa encouraged him to return to the gas station to see if it was still there. Well, it was dark, and Jackson felt it was probably gone by then. But Mom insisted he either needed to find it or he'd need to replace it. Her teen then requested his mother to go with him, but she reminded him that it's normal to make mistakes, that everyone in the family should learn to fix their mistakes.
Absolutely.
She's a tough cookie,
She is.
Yeah.
Small-sized,
That's
but
right.
strong in stature.
Dynamite comes in small packages,
Indeed
I'm
it
telling
does.
you.
Yep.
So she says, you either need to replace it or, or whatever. But she wasn't going with him. Now, she loves Jackson.
Absolutely.
But she knew this is a moment I can practice empathy or compassion. So after she said, you either need to fix the problem or whatever, when Jackson went to the gas station and didn't find it, he called Mom, and she said, well, there's an auto parts store not far from that. I think they're still open.
Yep.
It's going to be about $9. You can do this. But see, she was expressing, you can do this.
Yes.
So he goes over. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's 16. And he goes, well, I'm looking for a gas cap for a 2014 Corolla, whatever. And he gets it. And it works out really well. Now, think about Jackson at this point. He doesn't need his mama to fly in and save Jimmy Olsen. His mama has said, I believe you can do this.
Yes.
And I'm going to even offer some steps that I would take, but I'm going to let you do this. I think Jackson felt better, about his masculinity. Can I say that?
Yep.
About, oh my gosh, I'm able.
I can solve my own problems.
I'm becoming a man. Yeah. So I think I'm preaching to the choir. But folks, I hope you're hearing what I'm saying. I'm not anti-empathy. I'm saying do it. But do more than empathy.
Finish the
These
job.
These kids need us,
Yeah.
yes, to do this. So imagine, if you will, listeners, two columns, okay? There's an empathy column on the left-hand side and a compassion column on the right-hand side. Empathy is a shared feeling. Compassion is a redemptive action on your part. Empathy feels the hurt. Compassion heals the hurt. Empathy removes the hardship. Compassion equips the student.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy thinks short-term. Compassion thinks long-term, as we said. Empathy says, I will feel it with you. Compassion says, I will fix it with you. That was Melissa that night with her son Jackson. Empathy detects the pain. Compassion develops the person. And then finally, empathy means giving them to fish. Compassion means teaching them to fish.
All right, I love that we came full circle on that. So, Tim, how do we get practical with this? How do we actually move from empathy to compassion as leaders?
Yeah, there's a handful of steps that I've tried to walk. Maybe it's helpful for all of you. So first, I'm going to keep it real here. I urge you to camp out in the land of empathy for a while before you move to compassion.
If you're in sympathy land, you need to move on.
That's exactly right. So don't fail to let them know, I really know this is hard.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's not hard.
Yep.
Denial is not the answer.
Yep.
Okay? So camp out a little while in empathy land before you go to anything else. Be sure they know you feel their pain. Step 2 is to work on your own toughness. Let's be honest, to do compassion. It's the nurse, remember, who's got to give the injection. And that's not fun to poke somebody with a shot. So to be tough in the presence of another's pain does not mean you feel it less. It means to feel the pain without being impaired to act.
Yeah, you're not so crippled by watching somebody go through something
That's exactly
that you
right. Yeah.
fail.
Empathetic parents suffer with their kids when they're struggling at college. Compassionate parents can resist the urge to call the dean or to drive over to the university to treat their young adults like children.
There's a lot of people that need to hear that.
This is true. I'm just saying. I'm not saying.
Yeah.
Their compassion drives the parent to consider how much they want their child to be ready for independent living. And too many parents stop at empathy. So the final step I want to give you, scaffolding, is a term we use in both behavioral science and education.
Yeah.
Patrick and
And construction, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. And construction, yeah. But educators, you know this word scaffolding. So scaffolding is the essence of how we display compassion. So let me describe scaffolding. If you're driving downtown and you see a big building going up and there's scaffolding next to it, you know that's a bunch of metal bars that have been constructed.
Little platforms.
That's right, little platforms for the workers to stand on as they're laying bricks or doing what they're doing. But scaffolding is up there temporarily so the work can get done. When the building's done, you take the scaffolding away.
Yeah.
Teachers, parents, coaches, youth workers, put some scaffolding up. Help them build their building and then take the scaffolding away. But this doesn't mean you do it for them, okay? So it's not reactive, it's intentional. Because we feel empathy toward our students, we place scaffolding around them to equip them to do the work. Educational scaffolding might be structures in place to help them make wise choices about the assignment, maybe even deadlines, steps for them to accelerate their progress, problem-solving techniques that they can use over and over and over again. But you're giving them tools for them to do the work, but you're not doing it for them.
Love it.
Our kids deserve more. We must choose to grow compassion for the next generation, not just empathy. I've made the case 1,000 times. I'm so sorry for my repetition. But folks, we got to get this right.
We got to get this right. I love that. I love that.
So, Andrew, typically you're turning the closure over to me. I want you to close this out today because you and I have a dear friend that told us a story that perfectly ties a ribbon around this subject. Would you tell that story?
Yeah. Ryan Jenkins, if you know him, he's a brilliant communicator and author and writer. He's a great guy. But he told us the story of Clint Pulver. And I don't know if you've ever heard that name before, but certainly you will by the end of this story. When Clint was 10 years old, he had a terrible habit of tapping on everything. So he was a very high-energy kid, and he would tap his toes on the ground, pencils on the desk, fingers on any available surface. And for Clint, who's in all of these educational environments, classrooms, right, he quickly found out from all of his teachers that classroom is not the place for tapping. So Pulver would get scolded by his teachers, right? Oh, poor Clint, he's got ADHD, he can't sit still, can't stop tapping on things. And he spent so many times taking trips to the principal's office, and all of those punishments, all those trips to the principal's office could not stop him from tapping. Well, one day, Clint Pulver was with his teacher. His teacher's name was Mr. Jensen, and Mr. Jensen asked him to stay after class had ended. And Clint said this about the experience. He said, "I've always believed a single moment could change a person's life, and this was one of those moments for me." Clint was 34, by the way, when he was reflecting back on that moment. But as he's approaching Mr. Jensen's desk, instead of getting a scolding as he expected from all the other teachers who saw this ADHD kid with high energy, can't control himself, all those things, instead, Mr. Jensen opened the desk drawer that he had with him, reached in, and pulled out what became Clint Pulver's very first pair of drumsticks.
Perfect.
Isn't that awesome?
So yeah.
Mr. Jensen then looked at him and said, "Listen, you are not a problem. I actually think you're a drummer." I love that.
I do too.
Since that moment, Pulver has not put down those sticks, and he's been a professional drummer for over 20 years, touring, recording, playing drums all over the world. He even used drumming to pay for his college education.
Wow.
So that thing that all those teachers felt like was going to impair his education actually made it possible, all from that single moment when that teacher took the time to see that potential, recognized him as more than just a kid with ADHD or a kid with a tapping problem, and instead said, "You're not a problem. You're actually a drummer." Those two, by the way, are still connected even to this day. I love that.
Love it.
Well, listeners, you could be, I think, that kind of leader too, if you were able to take that final step and move from empathy to compassion. As you're looking for ways to develop your students, we want to commend to you a resource we have here at Growing Leaders. It's called Habitudes. Habitudes are simply images that form leadership habits and attitudes. We use pictures and stories and metaphors to help guide conversations with students about really important life skills like empathy and also compassion, taking action. If you want to find out more about our Habitudes program, head on over to growingleaders.com/SEL and you can find out all about it. Well, as always, if you would rate this podcast, give us 5 stars on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, we would greatly appreciate that. If you found this particularly helpful and thought of somebody to share it with, please do that. We would appreciate that as well. If you want to connect with us online on social media, we are at Growing Leaders and at Tim Elmore, pretty much everywhere you are. And then finally, if you have ideas for this podcast, maybe a person you think we should talk to or a subject you think we should cover, shoot us an email. It's podcast@growingleaders.com. We love getting those. Well, Tim, thank you once again for leading us in this really important conversation. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.